Welcome to the All Metal Mode podcast with your host, Michael Hare. Tune in every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern with co-host Gypsy Jules, and every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern with Matt Hoffman as we talk to guests, discuss metal detectors, equipment, and everything treasure related. Feel free to join in the discussion in the chat room during the show, and please, if you like what you hear, we'd appreciate you taking a moment, hit that like button, and share the link with your friends. We hope you enjoy the show. The All Metal Mode podcast starts right now.
Nocta Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere. A lifetime.
Good evening, everybody. You're listening to the All Metal Mode podcast. This is Mike Hare. And tonight, Matt is out. So we had Gypsy out last night. Matt, he's got explosive diarrhea now and pink eye, and I believe a few venereal diseases. This has not been confirmed. No, I'm kidding. He's got the crud too. He's got a cold, is coughing his head off and stuff, and told him I was going to say that though. He's like, fine, just do it. So, yeah. So both of them out this week. Chickens. I've been fighting off colds for weeks, and I ain't missed a show. Well, I guess I did. All Metal Mode on Facebook, All Metal Mode UK on Facebook. Check them out. We post the shows and stuff there. You're more than welcome to post your finds and different things on there. Nocta Macro USA on Facebook. And, of course, All Metal Mode every Monday and Tuesday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And All Metal Mode UK is every Thursday night at 8 p.m. GMT. Which is 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. AllMetalMode.com, you can find my articles there. If you go to the page and navigation up the top, you'll see articles. Of course, you can read through the rest of the website. Not that there's a whole lot going on there. It's more of a place to, I explain the podcast and stuff like that. You can find us on Spreaker. Of course, you can go out to Spreaker and you can download shows. You can listen live. You can listen anytime off of Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and some other affiliates. Don't forget, if you're a new listener, find the little chat bubble and join us in chat, ask questions, hang out. We have a good time in chat. 2019 Watts Rendezvous, 3-day golden treasure hunt, June 21st, 22nd, 23rd, Mancos, Colorado. $215 per person. The cutoff is May 15th. Tonight, of course, we've got Dorian Cook, and we are going to talk about relic hunting again. We're going to do part 2. This guy has so many stories, so many subjects he can talk on, but he felt like he didn't cover enough of the relic hunting, so we're going to get in down the road some KGC. We're going to get into some cache hunting, different things. But tonight we're going to do part 2. Another thing I wanted to bring up was the Texas Treasure Show is April 26th, 27th, and 28th. We found out from Keith Wills last night. And I think I'm going to be attending that. From my understanding, Gypsy's going to be attending that. I'm not 100% sure I'll be there, but if I am, I'd love to meet some of you. So that would be great. How you doing tonight, Dorian?
Oh, I'm doing fine, Mike. And it's kind of interesting. I was listening to one of your other podcasts earlier this morning, and it was really amazing. This guy and I have so much in common. Dorian Smith. Oh man! The more I listened, the more I thought, wow, he's had the same adventures I've had.
Oh, you must be getting old. How long did you listen before you realized it was you? Yep. I'm not making fun of me. Earlier we were talking about, Dorian and I were discussing what we were going to talk about on the show tonight, and he wanted to tell his story. And when he kind of gave me the overview, I said, you talked about that last week. And he said, oh, I'm getting old or something like that. And I said, don't feel bad. I'm 43 and I'm the same way. If the story hadn't have been so interesting, I'd have let you tell it again and would have forgot. So don't feel bad. Don't feel bad. But, yeah, Dorian, it's a real pleasure to have you back on again. We've enjoyed the shows. We've had a lot of people reach out and say, please get him back on, have him again. Love having him on. I told you earlier I had somebody reach out and said best podcast episode they've ever listened to out of any of the shows was with you. So I think that speaks volumes. Speaks volumes. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's really good. That beats being booed and tarred and feathered and run out of town on a rail, sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. I thought you were going to say something.
Oh, no, I'm waiting on you to kick it off here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were getting ready to say something. So we're going to go into relic hunting part 2. We discussed a few things before, and I'm looking forward to it as well. Maybe I'll have something to add to it, but yeah, where exactly do you want to go with that?
I want to start by just commenting on the difficulty that a lot of the younger people, especially newer people, and even some of the older people that do get involved in both Civil War and, say, Colonial or Revolutionary War relic hunting, they go out, and they hunt hard all day, and maybe they find 1 or 2 or 3 finds. A lot of that's happening. I know, I've seen guys do it. I run into guys down in Perryville all the time when I hunt the battlefield there, Perryville, Kentucky, that they not have much of a day. And, I'm not satisfied with going out and hunting all day on a battlefield and coming back with 2 or 3 artifacts. I routinely set a goal on the ones that are heavily hunted of 18 to 20 artifacts a day. And I push myself to try to make that goal. I don't always make it. Everybody can have a bad day. My partner and I got into a new field. Oh, beautiful, beautiful grass right down, pasture right down to the ground, perfect for swinging. And it was on the battlefield. It was between the lines, no man's land. It just looked like it ought to really produce for us. And, I saw in this whole 20-acre pasture, I saw maybe 1 dig hole. And I hunted that thing hard, and I didn't come up with anything. But what I want to get to on this is that especially when guys get into groups and they start seeing some of the collections that the older guys have, back when it was fairly easy to go onto a campsite or a battlefield and dig a lot of artifacts. I heard stories. I got started in '77, Civil War relic hunting, and I was already hearing stories of guys that had gone out in the 40s and 50s and found 20 Confederate belt buckles a day, things like that, with mine detectors. And, non-discriminating mine detectors. But there's always been a tendency to say, well, the glory days are gone. And it really would be more accurate to say the days of easy pickings are gone. There are still some amazing sites out there. Let me give you one before I tell you a very important story that I want to share with you tonight. One of the sites I ran across, it's not too far from your old stomping grounds. It's around Cincinnati. And, of course, there was a big scare of a Confederate invasion during the war, and they built 10 miles of forts and trenches across the Ohio River from downtown Cincinnati on the hills of northern Kentucky. And there was only 6,000 Confederates involved in the invasion, and they came up and found 60,000 Federal troops and all these forts and trenches and hundreds of guns waiting to receive them. They said, well, we changed our minds. We're going back to Lexington.
Right.
So there was no invasion of Cincinnati. But we call hunting that area the defenses of Cincinnati. And I came across an obscure reference from a newspaper reporter who was talking about how he had visited one of the batteries. And this was before the Confederates got there. And he watched them target practice for 3 hours. Now, this battery was a battery of 4 100-pound Parrott guns. So that means each shell they fired weighed 100 pounds.
Mm.
And they weren't firing explosive shells. They were firing solid shot Parrott shells that have kind of like a cut-off bottle nose on them. And they're called chill-nose Parrotts is the actual designation of the shell. These shells are quite rare, and they're worth, I haven't checked lately. I wouldn't be surprised if you couldn't get $800 for one. But anyway, they could fire, I think something like, on these big guns, they could fire a shell every 2 or 3 minutes. So let's say if they fired 20 shells an hour, each gun fired, for 3 hours, it would be roughly 60 of these big 100-pound solid shots. And they were target practicing. And so what they did, a mile away, they built a big target made out of railroad ties, probably about, 24, 30 feet square. And they painted a big white dot in the middle of it, and that was their target. And so they shot away at it for these 3 hours with these 4 guns. So you figure, like I said, each gun fired 60. That's 240 of these solid shots. And the reporter said they managed to nick the target twice. Well, guess what, folks? That site has not been found and excavated. Not one of those shells has been dug up. I've narrowed it down to 2 particular hills in northern Kentucky. But see, my point is there are some fantastic sites still left. And this particular site is still wooded. Houses are not built on it where the target area would have been. So you see, there is potential out there, but you have to go beyond what it's easy to do. You have to go beyond the easy research. You have to look for references in Civil War diaries and journals and old Civil War books that have not been viewed by all the relic hunters.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Now, that being said, there's a temptation, and it's in every generation of relic hunters, to cross the line and go into the national military parks like Shiloh and Gettysburg and places like that and hunt, at night, secretly, this type of thing. And a lot of times, because these hunters are driven with what I call relic hunting fever, they're not thinking clearly. They're not really considering the consequences if something goes wrong or they get caught. So I wanted to tell you a story. This was entitled, What Could Possibly Go Wrong? The names in this story are going to be changed to protect the guilty. And if someone should say, well, I think Dorian was talking about himself, I will neither confirm nor deny. But I think I can tell you that this story is a true story, and I think it really points up what I'm saying. And I'm hoping if there's any of you younger relic hunters out there that have been tempted to cross the line into the world of outlaw relic hunting, I hope you'll consider what I'm about to tell you. This story began with a couple of guys. One of them was a detector manufacturer's rep, and the other one was actually federal narc. He worked for the DEA. And he was metal detectors as a hobby, and he had come to the factory, was in the area for a conference, and came to the factory of this particular brand just to check up on the new detectors and things. And he met up with the factory rep while he was there, and they got to talking, and it turned out the factory rep needed to make a trip up into Northern Virginia to visit various of his dealers. And so the narcs basically said, well, why don't we go up in my car? I'll take you up and bring you back, and we can do some hunting along the way. So that was acceptable, and so the two guys planned a trip and began their trip. And they got up around Petersburg, Virginia, and they had managed to get permission from a farmer to hunt his field. And as luck turned out, this one had not been heavily hunted. And for whatever reason, you would have thought that there'd been 100 relic hunters by then that if they could have gotten permission would have hunted it. But anyway, the guys did well, and they filled their pouches with Civil War artifacts. Bullets, pieces of cannon shell, buttons, all, this kind of thing. So they had a really great time, great day. So as it got towards evening, they decided they better get on up. They had to go a lot farther up into northern Virginia there because the rep had an appointment the next day. So they decided to take a shortcut since they were running a little late, across country, get off the freeway. And by accident, they ended up actually driving right through the Bull Run National Battlefield. Of course, Bull Run was one of the first and one of the biggest battles of the Civil War. It was a really, really bad defeat for the Federal Army there. So when they found themselves driving through this park, they were both perhaps afflicted with a little touch of relic fever. And, one of them said, well, I really would like to, I'd like to get a few mini balls of souvenirs from the Bull Run. That's a really major battle. And the other one says, I would too, but look, you can see, look at those blazers driving around on the hills over there. Those are rangers, man. They're really patrolling this park. We can't do that. And the federal narc says, yeah, I know. He says, if they catch me in here, I lose my job. Mm-hmm. And the rep said, yeah, well, I've ridden armies in the Civil War, and I'm regarded as a professional. If they catch me, I could get 10 years in prison and a $100,000 fine. I can't afford to hunt the park either. So they agreed on an alternate plan. They'd drive through the park until they got out of the park, and then they would just find some farmer's pasture where there was no farmhouse near, and they would just sneak into the pasture, do a little, just a little trespass, and dig a few minis, and then be on their way. So that seemed like a much more reasonable thing. The biggest risk they were taking was a fine and maybe a few days in jail if they got caught by the local sheriff, which wasn't likely. So they drove through the park, and they could see these little white arrow signs on the trees that marked the boundaries of the Bull Run National Military Park. And they just kept on and on and on, and it seemed like the park was never going to end. Finally, the boundary markers were not visible anymore, and there were just woods and fields on both sides. And they said, oh, man, we're finally out of the park. So they came to a little hay field on their right and went up over a hill. And the hay was about somewhere between knee and thigh high. And they saw a culvert across the road ditch. And they said, well, we can just drive across the culvert, drive up over the hill, park our car out of sight over the hill. There's nobody out here. There's no houses. There's no nothing. And the farmers don't care about these mini balls. So we'll just get out and dig a few and then we'll be on our way. So they, were really happy with their plan and the fact that they had managed the risk as they saw it. So they drove across the culvert, drove up through the pasture and got over top of the hill where the car was out of sight of the road, got out and just kind of stretched and said, wow, man, this is going to be good. Look at that full moon coming up. So everything was going their way, they thought. And then the rep noticed something near a tree or on a tree over at the edge of the field. And he says, what is that over there? And the narc said, well, I don't know. I'm going to go over there and see. So he comes walking back with his head down. And he comes up and the rep says, well, what is it? He says, it's a park boundary marker. We're still in the National Military Park. Well, friends, let me tell you, they were not only still in the National Military Park, they were right on top of Matthews Hill where the hottest fighting of the whole battle took place. Mm. There's no doubt they were walking over top of hundreds of artifacts. But the problem is, consider the problem. They're wearing dirty clothes. They have relics, fresh dug relics in the car, and their metal detectors. And how would they ever convince anybody that they hadn't actually metal detected in the national park if they were caught? So they made haste to get out of there. And the rep walked in front of the car, which was a little VW Rabbit. He walked in front to make sure they didn't hit any holes, break an axle or anything. And he got down about 30 feet from where they crossed the culvert, and there was a broken electronic tripwire, which had been broken by the car when they drove in. Well, the rep had barely had time to yell at the narc, "Tom, broken tripwire!" And the narc did an amazing thing. He roared out onto the road and turned to the right, the direction they'd been going, just as 3 blazer loads of Rangers came over the hill behind them, on the road, with blue and red lights flashing. Well, the poor rep is standing there by the culvert, and his buddy's speeding away. And he did the only thing he could. He dived into the road ditch, which was about 3 feet deep, full of muck and water, and he was praying that there weren't any bad snakes in there. Well, the Rangers were so intent on the vehicle, they didn't see him with his camo clothes on. They didn't see him do that, and they drove by him almost close enough that he could have reached up and slapped the hubcaps as they went by. So everything got quiet. The Rangers and his buddy disappeared around the curve up ahead, and everything got real quiet. Nothing but the night sounds of the peeper frogs and the crickets and stuff. And the rep's laying there thinking, what am I going to do? I don't even know where I am. How far is it to anywhere? Because he's thinking, okay, they're going to catch him. They're going to radio ahead and have somebody at wherever the park ends. They're going to have another ranger there, and it's going to be over. So he's laying there, and about the time he decides he's going to have to try to just take off through the dark woods, and try to get somewhere where he can get to a phone, call one of his dealer buddies up there and get some help. Here comes his buddy. Here comes the narc back towards him with the 3 blazers of Rangers right behind him. Somehow the guy got turned around and is coming back towards him, but the Rangers are so close, he can't stop. So he disappears into the park, going deeper into the park, and the 3 blazers go right by the poor fellow laying in the ditch again. And about this time, the rep's thinking, I've entered the twilight zone. This can't be happening to me. Well, it seemed like an hour, but it was probably 10 minutes or so. Here came his buddy back again with the 3 blazers of Rangers still chasing, hot pursuit. Roars by him again, leaves him there in the ditch. Another 10 minutes go by. Here comes the narc back again. If you're wondering why the narc hasn't been caught, he had been through all those special schools, the federal government puts these guys through for escape and evasion and how to do the bootlegger turns and all that. So, in this case, if the rep hadn't picked this guy for a hunting partner, he would have certainly been toast. But anyway, they were having a hard time. The Rangers were having a hard time catching this guy. And he comes back, goes by the ditch there, and he disappears deeper into the park again. And about 15 minutes go by this time, and here he comes, and there are no Rangers behind him. So he screeches to a stop right where this poor guy is laying in the ditch. The rep jumps up, dripping mud and water, looking like a swamp thing. The narc throws the passenger door open and takes off before the rep hardly gets in the car. And there they are, heading back toward the way they'd originally been going. And here came the 3 blazers, load of Rangers over the hill. And for the first time in his life, the rep is involved in hot pursuit.
Now, you say first time. Was this the first time or last time?
Well, this
first
is the
and last?
let's just say this was the first time that he had ever been in trouble with the law.
Okay.
And he was in serious trouble because if he's caught, he's facing 10 years in prison and a $100,000 fine. And for you guys who aren't considered professionals, you amateurs out there, if you're caught, if the judge decides to throw the book at you if you're convicted, you can get 5 years in prison, and you can get a $10,000 fine for violating the ARPA Act, AARPA, Archaeological Resources Protection Act. It's what they prosecute you under. So it's not a minor thing. It's not going to be a slap on the wrist, a weekend in jail on a trespass charge, and maybe a $300 or $400 fine. It's going to wreck your life. And now, with the new civilian confiscation laws, they catch you doing this in a park, they can take your vehicle. They will take your vehicle. They will take your metal detectors, and they can go on and take your bank accounts, your house, and all of your assets. And if they take them, the record is only 10% of the people who have their assets seized ever get them back. So I want, your listeners to understand that it's not worth it. There's no civil artifact that is worth having your life disrupted in such a horrible manner. Well, anyway, getting back to our two intrepid relic hunters, would-be relic hunters, who actually, again, they're not guilty of actually having dug a single record or artifact, in the Bull Run battlefield or even in some farmer's field. They have nothing to show for all of this except hot pursuit. So they're heading down the road, and the Narc's got that little rabbit maxed out, and the rep says to him, well, we've had it. They're just going to set up a roadblock at the park entrance, in this direction. They'll just call the locals. The police will be there waiting for us. And the Narc, and you have to see this guy. This Narc was shaved head, big black handlebar mustache, really beautiful actually, and a great mustache, and big thick black eyebrows. This guy looked like evil incarnate, but he was really a good guy. And he just calmly says, "No, they're not." And the rep says, "What do you mean? No, they're not." "Sure they will." He says, "No, they won't." He says, "How can you be so cocksure that they're not going to get us in the roadblock?" He says, I'm a Fed. I know how the system works." He says, "If these guys can't catch us themselves, they got too much pride to call in the locals. If we get to the park entrance, we're safe." And the rep's not hardly believing that at all. And, he's having a few sessions as they're going down the road of, "Oh, God, if you get me out of this, I'll never do it again." And,
right.
And anyway, suddenly up in front of them are these two big stone columns, one on each side of the road, and marks the entrance to the park at that end. And they go roaring through the columns at about 80, and they're suddenly on a residential street with houses stacked one after another on both sides and cars parked on both sides of the street. So the rep turns around to look at the Rangers' vehicles, which were running maybe 100 yards behind them, and he sees the brake lights go on and a big dust cloud right at those stone columns. And they stopped right there, did not go any farther. And so the Narc eased his speed down so he wouldn't draw the attention of any local cops, and they quietly puttered off into the night with an incredible story to tell.
That is neat. Now, you bring up a really interesting thing that I'd like to ask, since you have been around it since detecting since the 70s. I have met a few old timers, and although I have a lot of respect, one of the things that I have not talked to an old timer, and I'm not saying they're out there, but that didn't trespass. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like a lot of those guys in the 70s who did that really kind of hurt the hobby for some of us. I mean, I had a cop, okay, police, actually a detective, who told me stories back in the late 70s going to a historical park. I'm not even going to name it. And the cops pulling in and him and his hunting buddies on their hands and knees running around a statue as the cop pulled back and forth looking for him. Now, this is a cop, so I feel like that stuff was, you're always going to have those bad apples, and there's guys who still do it, but I feel like it was a lot more prevalent back in the 70s and even 80s. What do you think?
Well, let me give you a recent example. I mentioned to you that one of the places that I hunt with my hunt buddy is Perryville Battlefield. And for those who don't know, Perryville was one of the 20 biggest battles in the Civil War, and the biggest one in Kentucky. So we have permissions on a very, very important part of the battlefield from a farmer there. Part that's not in the state park. The state park's got 1,000 acres of the battlefield, and they're doing a very good job of returning the battlefield to what it looked like at the time of the battle. And I applaud that, and I wouldn't think of going into the state park to hunt, because certainly as illegal as it would be in the federal park. But we have permissions on this private land, and we've been very careful to fill our holes, and to close fence gates and not to do anything anyway that would draw the ire of the farmer that gave us permission. In fact, my partner who got the original permission developed a pretty good friendship with this guy. And apparently, some other hunters saw us in there, and they decided that if we were in there, they could be too. We ran into 4 guys, and we thought they had permission from the guy too, and not one of them had permission. And the farmer tells, the last time we went down, the farmer tells my buddy, "I'm sorry, but I've banned relic hunting on my property." He said, "I've had a dozen guys in here that I didn't give permission to hunting." So even though we had done everything right, we paid the penalty right along with the bad guys. Mm-hmm. So, Mike, I don't think anything's changed. If it was done in the 70s, it's still being done right now. Yeah, I agree. It's a horrible thing. We've talked about last place I lived in Ohio was Lancaster, which is about an hour southeast of Columbus, Ohio. And up in the northeast part of Fairfield County, which is Lancaster, I could not hardly get any permissions up there. And the reason being was they were tired of arrowhead hunters sneaking onto the property and them having to kick them off. And, I'll tell you, folks, if you talk to these farmers, 9 times out of 10, if the crops aren't up and stuff, they don't care. But if you really want to piss them off, go in there without permission and see how they feel about it. It's just a thing of respect. And trust me, do it. And if you don't get permission, move on to the next one. There's plenty of places to hunt. So it's best. Go ahead. Can I interject something there? Yeah, absolutely. If you find yourself, sometimes, people accidentally stray onto a piece of property next to the one they've got permission on, and they don't even realize that it doesn't belong to the one the farmer they've got permission on, and they get caught. And let me say this, especially to you younger guys: you may get a chewing out, and it may have profanity in it from that other guy. Take it like a man or a woman, if you're a woman. All right. Do not answer back. Don't use any profanity. Don't get belligerent. Get humble and say, "Yes, sir, I am so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to trespass or cause you any trouble. I will leave immediately, and I will never trouble you again, sir. Again, please accept my sincere apologies." I have had that happen. I was accosted by a drunk landowner. We were hunting airheads, and I couldn't find out who owned the land. Well, the land turned out was watched, and the neighbor watched and called the guy, and he came out and caught me and my buddy right there. And boy, he just proceeded to work us over with his mouth, and it wasn't pleasant. And he went on and he vented for about 10, 15 minutes. And when he finally stopped to catch his breath, I did exactly what I just mentioned. Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. I'm sorry. We didn't know who owned the field, but we're really sorry, and we'll leave right now. We'll never bother you or trouble you again. And the guy looked down at the ground. He had a beer in his hand, and he looked down at the ground for a second. And he looked up. He says, "Oh, hell, you guys go ahead and hunt." And opened 500 acres to us with permission, just like that. And that's not an isolated case. I would say, now, I've had people chew me out and throw me off and didn't give me permission. But I'd say 3 out of 4 times, if you get humble and apologize all over yourself, there's a good chance they'll go on and give you permission.
Mm-hmm. I can't say I've ever done it metal detecting, but many, many, many years ago, while deer hunting, I got kind of turned around in the woods, and it was real hilly and stuff. And I had permission, of course, but I ended up on somebody else's property. There was no signs, no fences, anything like that. And I ran into the owners, and, they asked what I was doing. And I told them, I'm hunting on so-and-so's property. I've got permission. They said, well, you're not on their property. And I said, oh, I'm sorry. I know I got a little turned around. Matter of fact, I'm a little lost. But they were just nice as can be. But yeah, for me, it's really, I couldn't even enjoy myself if I didn't have permission. I couldn't even enjoy myself. So there's no sense in me trying. Like I said, most of the time it's pretty easy to get permission. Pretty easy.
Well, and I want to take this to the next level. I'm actually, everything I've been giving you is building up to trying to help your listeners actually find sites that have been little work or not worked at all, that they can actually dig 50, 60, even 100 artifacts for every hunt they go. It is possible. And I really do want to tell them how to do that.
Okay, let's do it.
There is human nature follows the path of least resistance, and they want to, everybody wants to, just drive up, park, get out, go in the field and start finding. Mm-hmm. And there was a time when you could do that, and there would still be places where you could do that, but they would be in places where nobody thinks anything happened, but something did. And there are those places, and sometimes they can be found by what I call cold turkey hunting. Just going in and being willing to walk the fields in an area until you find a site. But if you're going to find, and there's thousands of sites that haven't been found, people, campsites, battle sites, 22,000 battles and skirmishes are recorded in the Civil War, and there's probably that many more that were not. I found when I moved into my little mountain valley here, I discovered a bushwhackers battle site right on the mountain right behind my house. I'm sitting here right now about 200 yards from it, and then right across the street from me on the opposite mountain, I found a cavalry camp, a Union cavalry camp, and neither one of them is documented. Mm-hmm. Neither one. If I were to walk all the hills around here, I would find others. But nobody wants to go out and come home empty-handed. And let me tell you a story about what can happen if you're willing to do that. I had a good friend up in Northern Virginia who was a very, very accomplished hunter, wrote a book and everything, and he and his partner found a lot of big campsites. And they had one that had eluded them for years, for 2 years, actually. They'd spent 2 years of dry runs looking for this big Confederate camp and couldn't find it. And they finally decided they were looking in the wrong spot, and they had made plans to go out on the weekend and try a new place. It was way back down a logging road in the boonies. So one of the two guys that actually had a metal detector dealership and sold Nautilus metal detectors. And he had sold a fella a Nautilus just the day before they were going to go. And this guy had never Civil War relic hunted in his life. It was his first really good detector besides a little cheap Radio Shack or something he had. So he was a real newbie. And he wanted a relic hunt. And so the dealer decided, okay, let's take him with us on this hunt, and give me a chance to work with him and teach him how to use his detector. So they drive 2 or 3 miles down a really rutted logging road, 4-wheel drive road, and it finally comes to an end. And so they get out and they start walking through the woods, looking for a water source, which would be necessary for this camp, to exist near because of the need of the soldiers for water. And they walk nearly 2 miles. Now, ask yourself, you hunters that are listening, would you do this? Would you do this? They did this. They walked 2 miles, and they come out on kind of a nice flat area that gently rolls down to a big, beautiful creek. And the dealer says, this looks like a good place to start. Let's get out of our packs here, let's just start hunting right here. Well, they're getting all set up, and the new guy says, Jimmy, I can't get my detector to tune. And, Jimmy the dealer has his back to him. He says, well, I checked it when I did the shop yesterday. It was working fine. He says, well, it doesn't seem to be now. I can't tune it. So Jimmy turns around kind of impatient, and looks at the guy. The guy's got the detector with the coil sitting on the ground. And so Jimmy grabs the detector, whips it up in the air, tunes it right up. He says, there's nothing wrong with this. It tunes fine. And the guy says, well, it wouldn't do that for me. And Jimmy got suspicious, and he swung the detector over the spot where the guy had set the coil and got a huge signal. Bam. Kicked the leaves. Kicked the 2 or 3 inches of leaf mold aside, and there was a Virginia State Seal belt buckle looking at him.
Dorian, let me pause you right there. I feel like I know you good enough that I can joke with you.
Okay.
I hope I'm not crossing the line. Before I have you on each week, I feel like I'm going to have to make you listen to our previous shows because you told that last time.
I did?
Yeah, you did. I'm sorry. I'm just playing. You know what? I would have stopped you if I didn't want to hear it again. Once I realized you were I'm like, I like that story. Let's hear it again. All right. But no, you told that one.
Let me focus on the aspect of it that ties in with what I'm trying to get the point. All right. This was the result of 2 years of searching, and finally they found the site.
Mm-hmm.
They found the site. And by the way, part of this is because, on our group page, I'm posting stories and things, and it's kind of hard sometimes to forget what you said.
Well, you and I have talked hours. You've been posting on the group. I know. Look, that's not an age thing. You've got a lot going on, and you've really been doing a lot. Why you mentioned that? I want to excuse me. I want to tell everybody he's got a Facebook page, Facebook group that is amazing. Great stories. He's constantly adding stories. He's had some great people adding good stories and stuff. I mean, there's some great Facebook groups out there that I love. And this one has become my favorite because Dorian has shared so many good articles and stories. We dig the Civil War headquarters, and I highly recommend checking it out. Absolutely. Once I get woke up in the morning, get Randy some food going and stuff, I'll sit down and get woke up and and I'll look. Sorry, guys, I'm fighting off another cold. But I'll sit down and go through his Facebook group. We dig the Civil War headquarters. Go ahead, Dorian. I'm sorry.
That's all right. I'll tell you what, I can get us into some stuff here that I know I haven't gone over with you, or even I haven't even put this on the group yet either. So I'm going to help. I want to help your audience find places that they can hunt. And let me finish one thing about the point about the camp with the belt buckle. the guy walked that far and actually put his detector down on a Civil War belt buckle. That was the camp they were in, of course. And that camp provided them 2 years of profitable hunting. 2 full years. So they spent 2 years locating it, but when they found it, now this doesn't mean that they didn't hunt other places during those 2 years, but it means they made frequent trips looking for that camp for 2 years before they finally found it.
Yeah.
They took many rare and very valuable Confederate belt buckles out of that camp. But the point is, most people, they can't stand to go one day without finding anything. So they're not going to do 4 or 5 or 6 dry runs, even if it's going to get them an unworked site.
Right.
See?
And I think with that, I think that comes with patience and age and the amount of time you've been detecting, because I'm there. Of course I want to go out every time and find something, but I'm at a point where I could for sure deal with some dry runs to find that one good thing that's worth, that one good site. And, the best of sites, they're going to take time. If you go out and find it right away, you are one lucky person. Because, the best sites, research is only going to get you so far. Maps are only going to get you so far. And it's going to be a lot of guessing and footwork. And I agree. I mean, but I do think that's harder to do when you're newer to the hobby.
Okay, well, what we want to do is get the people that are newer into what's called the ORs, the Official Records of the War of Rebellion. And they're online. You can type in ORs in a search, or Official Records of the War of the Rebellion, and they'll come up, and you can go through them. It was originally 128 volumes. They were printed in 1895, and I have some of the original volumes on my bookshelf over here that I'm looking at. But anyway, they have these all online now, so you guys don't have to obtain these collector's items, because that's what the books are now. They're collector's items, carry premium. But I want to read. Here's some pages that I pulled out just doing some research in Kentucky, and I want to read to you the kind of leads that are in the ORs. And there's hundreds of thousands of leads in the ORs, and many of them have not even been found yet. The more obscure ones are the ones you want to hunt now. To the hunters back in the early 70s, the guys that were digging all these belt buckles.
Hey, Dorian, there you are. You're going in and out. I don't know if you there?
How about now?
There you go. There we are.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. All right. Like I said, once it's, as I mentioned before the show, once I get my office done in the trailer, I'll be a lot closer to the router, and then we won't have this problem.
Okay.
On my wireless.
Well, I don't know. I think it was more of just a glitch, because it sounded like you stepped away from your phone almost. It wasn't like, it wasn't like you were cutting out or anything like that. It just, I think it was just a glitch. We're fine.
Okay. All right. Like I said, I want to give you some ideas. If you guys that have never gone to the ORs, I was doing research on Kentucky, and here's what I want to read to you, just a little bit, an excerpt. It starts out, this is all the reports of all the officers down to the rank of lieutenant in the Civil War, of all the different battles and skirmishes and things that are recorded. And here's one that says Tompkinsville, Kentucky. So that narrows down a location. And let's see. Here we go. He's talking about marching, and he says, I'm going to break into the middle of the sentence here. On the evening of June 4th, inform the junction as directed in my order on the following day, and immediately march towards Centerville in the direction of Tompkinsville and Saline, and on the night of the 5th, encamped on the farm of Mr. Moore about 8 miles from and to the south of Tompkinsville. that's practically an X marks the spot.
Yeah.
That one might take a day to find, but it's very possibly one that nobody has ever looked for and found. Mm-hmm. And the nice thing about looking for these unknown camps and things, they are in areas that have not seen hordes of relic hunters, and the landowners are almost always, the great majority are going to let you hunt because they've had no negative experiences.
Right.
So that's another reason for getting into these looking for these smaller sites. I want to read you a few more of these.
Dorian, real quick, we've got a question. I like to take questions as they pop up as the chat moves, so I don't forget. Ask Dorian if he knows where to view the sketches that accompany the ORs.
Where to view them?
Yeah, where to view the sketches.
Are you talking about the maps?
I'm not sure what he's talking about.
The Civil War Atlas. It's called the Civil War Atlas.
Okay.
If that answers the question, it should be online also. I don't tend to use it too much. I tend to use more modern, maps, because basically the Atlas is going to be maps of mostly your bigger battles, not your smaller skirmishes.
Okay.
What I want is a lead, just like the one I read to you.
Okay, I got. Yeah, you're wanting the little less known.
Pardon? I'm sorry. What?
You're searching for the little less known sites.
That's because that's the ones that are hard to find, right. And there's a lot more of those that haven't been found yet.
Right.
And like I said, they're going to make some awfully good hunting for people, and I don't mind tell you this because there's more than. You're not going to take away my hunting sites, by starting to do this. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. It's funny. I have shared extensively, how to field hunt where old houses were and how to overlay and stuff. And, that's how I feel about it. There's so many of those places out there, and it's not like anybody's going to take my site. So, yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's a good way to share. Absolutely.
Yeah, hang on just a sec. I need a little more light on this reading. And there's just so many in here. There's, like I said, literally hundreds of thousands. Let me read. I'm going to break into this one here to show you. I proceeded in the wade until I struck the lower Fishing Creek Road about 1 mile from the main road leading to the enemy's fortifications. I turned and proceeded down the road until I formed a junction with your column and remained with you until we came in sight of the enemy's breastworks, where I halted my brigade until you had arranged your batteries upon the hills commanding the rebel camp. After the artillery had shelled the enemy's works for some time, I received your order to move with my brigade to Russell's house on the north bank of the Cumberland River and prevent a flank movement of the enemy. Man, this is fantastic. Mm-hmm. He's giving you landmarks. He's telling you, where they were. You see?
Oh yeah.
And there's just, like I said, there's literally hundreds of thousands of these kind of leads. Here's one. Headquarters district of Eastern Kentucky, Louisa, Kentucky. I have the honor to transmit to you a report having definite information of a rebel camp under command of a Major James French having been established at Piketon in Pike County, Kentucky. And then he goes on, he says, we captured Major French, one surgeon, one mustering officer, and so on. He lists all these deals. And he starts listing the supplies they captured and completely destroyed their camp. Man, you're talking about a lot of artifacts there.
Right. Absolutely.
So take note and avail yourself of the ORs, and you can do a search. If you're in a particular state or town or whatever, type in the name. Maybe you never heard of a battle. Let's say, for example, you live near, well, where you are, Mike.
Cleburne,
Texas, right?
Mm-hmm.
You type in Cleburne, Texas, and it will bring up a list of all the references to Cleburne, Texas on the search in the ORs. And it takes time to go through them, but it's great work to do on rainy days or cold, snowy winters. When you can't do anything else, you can't go out and swing. This is when you do your research.
Right.
And you just, you start making you up a book. I have a loose leaf notebook here, 3-ring notebook, and I have a label on the outside that says Civil War. And it is about 2.5 inches thick, and it's absolutely full of leaves. A lot of them I'm just never going to get to in this life. I've got so many. So don't let anybody tell you if you're a new person to relic hunting or battle detecting. Don't anybody let them tell you that the glory days are all gone and that you're just going to have to enjoy the few crumbs that are left, because you will excuse me.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Just one more statement. You will program yourself to believe that, and that's what you will get, the crumbs. You'll never do anything great if you're satisfied with the crumbs. Don't be. Set your mind, I'm going to find one of these places that's never been hunted, never been touched, and I'm going to have bragging rights to all the relics that are in that place.
I'm sorry, real quick. Jason Dunn says he's not too far from you. I just found a lot of info on Civil War camps in Whitesburg, Kentucky. He's asking if you know anything about that area.
I think I've got Whitesburg in this book that I'm talking about, but I have not hunted that area personally.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, I don't think if I remember right, he's in Indiana, but real close to the Kentucky border, real close to Kentucky. Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's right in Indiana, though, I think. I don't know. I'm sure he'll tell us, but yeah.
So like I said, that thing of being willing to go cold turkey in an area that there was Civil War activity, but you don't find any ready records of any big battles or camps. Follow the creeks, follow the rivers. Armies had to have water, and unless the commanding officer was a fool, they would generally, dig in on the south side of the hills if they were going to be there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I remember we were back in about 3 million acres of timber company land in Arkansas, actually looking for something pertaining to the Knights of the Golden Circle, and just walked up on a hill out in the middle of nowhere, and there was the most beautiful set of rifle pits all the way around this hill, three lines of them, one on top of the other. And we said, wow, that means there's a camp on the top of this hill. And Mike, we went up there, and it was perfect for a camp, nice and flat. And we hunted it hard half a day, and I think came up with 2 square nails for the whole day. Somebody, they had come, they dug these rifle pits, they built this camp, and then before they could even spend the night, I guess, they got orders for something to march away. And that happens sometimes.
That's interesting.
But one thing too, Mike, while we're talking about metal detecting a camp or relic hunting, one of the mistakes that the whites users used to make was they would go looking for camps, and they would have the iron tuned out, and so their detector was silent on the nails. And the square nails are the way we find the camps, because I didn't understand why there were always thousands of square nails in the bigger camps. Little square nails about 2.5, 3 inches long, fairly thin. And I thought, where did all these square nails come from? And then on a trip to the Museum of the Confederacy in Richmond, Virginia, which is I'd highly recommend for anybody that can do it, here was an actual wooden crate of Civil War canned goods, canned food for the soldiers, still intact and on display. And this crate had these square nails, maybe a 1/4 inch apart, all the way up and down both sides on all 4 corners.
Okay.
And I begin to understand how there could be so many square nails in these camps. They would, they would break the crates up and burn them for fuel in the campfires and stuff. And these nails end up getting scattered everywhere. But the blessing of the nails is, without the nails, it would be possible, if you're cold turkey hunting a camp, to walk through that camp and out the other side without hitting a non-ferrous target. And you'd never know that you'd walk through a camp.
Oh,
but
wow.
if you could hear the nails on your detector, that's the first indication. When you start hearing it, I used to like to use the Fisher 1262X because that thing would give you a zit, zit, zit sound when you got to those square nails. And, you could recognize the nails from any other big iron or anything else with that sound. And, I found several camps that way with the Fisher by, finding the nails first. And then when you start getting the nail sounds, that's when you slow down and really start working it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Square, some people hate those nails. I love those nails because that's a sign of an habitation or habitation or something. Something was going on there, and I love those nails.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Right. If you also consider, some people say, well, I only want to hunt Civil War sites because I want to find Civil War belt buckles. Everybody wants to find a belt buckle, or plates as we call them. Cartridge box plate, the breastplate, the belt buckle. They're all kind of lumped together as plates. One of the best places to find plates in this time is at old house sites that were there or they can be 50 or 100 years before the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And you'll not only find belt buckles and things that got lost after the veterans came home and were still living in that house. We have a lot of houses around here in the area where I live that predate the Civil War, 1810, 1830, 40. And there are Civil War artifacts found in the front lawns along with the typical coins and other relics that those places produce. You might dig a 1700s cut Spanish silver coin or a large cent. It's the same place, at 6 feet from it, you dig a Civil War button or belt buckle.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Even up in the fields of Ohio, we find it's pretty common to find eagle buttons and stuff. The story I always heard is they come home with their jackets and they became their farm jackets and stuff. I don't know if that's.
Did you have much trouble identifying what kind of a site you had after you say you had 10 good finds?
They were house sites.
Okay. All right. We got into a militia camp here, about 7 or 8 miles north of me on the Ohio River. Soybean fields. There had been a 1780s town called Graham, and the house sites were not real close together. They were strung out all along the riverbank for about a mile. So you work one house site, then you walk the field, not have any signals, and suddenly the signals start up again. You're at another house site. But between these two houses, we knew this one house site had belonged to a man named Obadiah Stout, and that he'd been a colonel in militia about the time of the War of 1812 or before. And he established a militia training camp right next to his house. So we got into the house site and the camp, and my hunting partner and I, over several trips, dug 450 flat buttons. Not a one of them with any insignia on. Really nice. I mean, every kind of flat button you can imagine. Your silver-plated ones, the big ones from the 1700s that are about the size of a 50-cent piece. We got little bitty ones that were, they weren't any bigger than your little fingernail. And we thought, okay, this is definitely only, a pre-war or probably late 1700s militia site, because the town had been established in 1780. So I happened, my hunting partner moved away, and I got a new hunting partner who was a coin hunter. He wasn't interested in relics. So I told him, I said, well, I'll take you out to Obadiah Stout's house, and maybe you can find a few old coins. We've done pretty good out there. I've got Spanish cut silver and stuff like that. So Mike, we get out there, and this guy's a good coin hunter. He's very thorough, but he's going to hunt the area that we have beat to death. I mean, we've already taken 450 buttons out of it, so it's not like you're going to walk out there and find one in 10 minutes. So remember, out of all those buttons, just simply flat buttons, no insignia, which we were hoping for. Well, my buddy Roger goes out there, and he hunts all day with me. At the end of the day, we start comparing finds. First thing he shows me is two beautiful cast brass eagles, War of 1812, with the eagle on the front of them. First insignia buttons, and he found two of them. Then he shows me a North Carolina Starburst button from the Civil War, and then a Confederate Block Eye button. He had all four of these in one hunt there, and we managed, and he took them right out from where we took all these 450 buttons. How did we miss those buttons? And how did he get four with insignia in one day when we couldn't get a single insignia in 450 buttons? You see my point?
Yeah.
The rules are, there are no rules. Weird things happen when you hunt. But we had assumed that town had vanished before the Civil War, and those buttons proved it had not. Somebody was living in Obadiah Stout's house, after the Civil War, and that's how those buttons got in the field.
That's incredible. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, I think it goes back to, I always tell people, learn a detector. Okay, I agree with that completely. But also, you don't rebuild the engine in your car with one tool, or, rebuild your house or remodel your house with a hammer. I'm a big fan of different tools for different jobs. I mean, it's not even saying one tool's better than the other, but sometimes just running different technology over the same site makes a world of difference.
Well, Mike, you better stay out of Kentucky, because we have a saying here, if it needs fixing, get a hammer, and if you can't fix it with a hammer, get a bigger hammer.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I think there's kind of two different ways to look at it. Yeah. Get really good with that one detector, but also I think, if you can learn a new detector, and, I kind of got a knack for learning new detectors. I love learning it. I enjoy that. So, I'm more in the, I want more tools for the job kind of thing.
Have you, let me play the part of the interview for a second, Mike. Did you, in all of that field hunting on house sites, ever dig a small cache, a jar of coins?
No.
Let me ask, all right, I'm going to put you on the spot here a little bit, okay? Mm-hmm. Did you ever take a jar of coins, bury it a foot deep in the middle of an old house site, and listen to how it sounded on your detector?
No, I did not. No.
May I suggest, if you ever want to find a cache on a house site, that you do that sometime, and I'll suggest the same thing to your reader or to your listeners.
What kind of jar would you recommend? An old mason
jar? Mason jar with zinc lid.
Mason jar with what? You kind of cut out just a little bit.
Okay, mason jar with a zinc lid, a common zinc lid that they used in the 1800s.
Okay. That's
it'll have the white porcelain insert in it. inside it.
Mm-hmm. No, I can't say I've ever found one.
I've had, I built a test area, and I had people tell me, oh, yeah, my detector will do such and such, and it'll find such and such deep, So I took them out to the test area. I said, okay, show me. And they all discovered that they couldn't live up to their claims, And I actually, one of the things I did, I put a 4-inch diameter plastic pipe in the ground about 6 feet deep, using, dug a post hole, put the pipe in with a cap on the other end, and cut it off at ground level. And then I had a little grate that I could put on top of it. And I had a mason jar full of pennies. And I had a rope tied to it, and I put a bolt, eye bolt through the top of the mason jar. I didn't use a zinc lid. I used a standard canning lid and drilled it out and put the eye bolt in and the rope. And I had the rope marked off in increments of inches and feet. And I would put that jar of coins down into the ground. We'd start at a foot, and then we'd lower it down into the pipe at 18 inches, and then 2 feet. And we would start to get an idea of what a deep sounding cache would sound like, because I would say 9 out of 10 or more of all the caches that anybody's going to find are going to be jars of coins.
Right.
Not stacks of gold bars. Much as we'd like that. But my point is, very few detectors actually take the things that they want to find and bury them in the ground and familiarize, get acquainted with how those signals sound in the ground. So that really would help right there in terms of more finds on sites.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Never
I
thought
took
to do that.
I took a replica, a cheap replica brass belt buckle, size of a Civil War buckle, and I by the same token, actually I took several, and I buried them a foot, 18 inches and so on, when I was using the Garrett Deep Seeker with a 14-inch coil to see just how far down could I hit those coils or hit those belt buckles, and what would they sound like on my machine. And that will greatly lessen the chance that you'll pass over a signal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would. That's a good idea. No, I've never done that. Now, when I'm field hunting, I'm sorry, guys. I'm coughing a bunch. I keep hitting mute. When I field hunt, you're not going to find. I hunt the ones that predate, electric and plumbing. So, you dig everything that repeats. It's not iron, and heck, you dig some of the iron. So, I don't think I would ever miss something like that because I do. I dig everything in those sites.
Well, I know that some detectors, after a certain depth, will even take a non-ferrous target and give you an iron signal. I can't say, I'm not going to get into brands and which ones, but the way you determine if your detector has that problem is to bury something, different depths, and listen. Does a good signal just finally fade out, or at some point does it start being broken, like it sounds like good and bad, and then a little deeper, and then it sounds like a piece of iron? Are we still connected?
I'm sorry, Dorian. I thought I took my phone. I took myself off of mute. I think I just lost Dorian. Yeah, let me get him back. I keep hitting mute because I'm coughing. I'm getting sick again. I apologize, everybody.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system.
And we lost him.
Dorian Cook
is not available.
Sorry
At the
about
tone.
that, folks. I apologize. Let me see if I can get him back again. I'm not sure I don't know there we go. Hey, Dorian.
Sorry about the disconnection there.
Oh, no problem. I didn't know if you hung up because you didn't hear me. I keep putting I keep muting myself because I'm coughing, and I'd muted you, and I forgot to take you off, and I started talking. So I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry.
I thought the call had dropped.
No, I was talking, but I was on mute. I'm sorry. I have to keep muting because I'm coughing again.
Sure.
Stupid cold's coming back. Yeah. But yeah, that's a really good idea. That's something I'll have to try. Never gave it much thought. I'll tell you, my brother owns some property that there's rumors that the owner buried his money on the property, but, I guess nobody really knows. Nobody really knows.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about where do you look on a piece of property, and why should you look at all? Well, you consider the fact that up even as late as 1910, only 20% of the American people were using banks to keep their money in. So that means a huge percentage of the people were burying their money in a jar or a pot, and that was their bank. They would make deposits and withdrawals, and because now that's again, you had your rich geezers, that would bury pots deeper and stuff like that because they were not part of the bank; they were actually part of their savings. So that's a different cash. But what we call the post-hole banks, because routinely the farmers would dig they would have a post in the fence they could pull out of the ground, and underneath it was the mason jar. They could reach down in there and grab it and pull it out. And they could add money or take away money as they needed it out of the jar. And so we came to call those caches post-hole banks. Back in the old days anyway, as they say back in the day, I think it's still a good term. But human nature is such that everybody that put one of these caches in the ground was sure that nobody else had thought of that that was their idea, to bury it under the rose bush in the front yard or wherever. And as a result of the fact that everybody thought that they had these unique hiding places, they actually, these caches are very predictable because so many people used exactly the same types of locations to bury their money.
Right.
Okay, so if a house is still standing and I want to look for the possibility of somebody's cash who buried it and died before he could tell anybody where it was, I want to find the bedroom. And I want to look out the bedroom window or windows because it was common for many people to bury their bank or their money somewhere where they could see the spot from their bedroom window, or in some cases from the living room window, but basically the bedroom was more common. So if, let's say that looking out a bedroom window, there's a big oak tree about 100 feet away, well, two places to look would be halfway between the window and the tree, and the other place would be right up against the tree, just out enough from the roots where you can dig a hole. See? So patterns like that. If you can determine where the barn is or was, another good spot was right inside the barn doors because the barn doors had dirt floors, and they could dig up the floor and pull out his cash, do his banking business, put it back in, put the dirt back in, and then the animal tracks going in and out would cover up any signs of activity.
Not only that, he could do that in in privacy. Nobody's seen him because he's inside the barn.
That's an excellent point. That's an excellent point. Fun things like under the old bird bath out in the front yard where you have a circle of rocks, things like that. People would pick locations. They weren't going to just go out in the woods and say, like in the pirate movies, where they 30 paces east and then 45 paces north, and then 60 paces south. This was their bank, and it had to be simple, and it had to be no deeper than about their elbow. Some of the old guys would call them elbow deposits because they didn't want to dig a 6-foot hole every time they needed to put money in or take it out.
Right. Exactly.
So you're going to find, these caches in the top 24 inches of soil. And that's why I would say it would be very, very wise to take fill a jar full of pennies or something, mason jar, put it in the ground, bury it, start at a foot and then 18 inches and then 2 feet. And if you can get familiar with those signals and what it sounds like, then you're much better equipped to hunt the old house sites.
Yeah, absolutely. That's that's a brilliant idea. Because you're right, I've never buried one and done that. That's a good idea to see what it would read. Dorian, I'm really struggling here. I'm getting sicker and sicker. What if we call it? What if we go ahead and call it a night tonight?
Sure, I understand.
Are you interested in coming back next week? Do you need a break?
Nope, we're doing fine.
Okay. Do you want to do next Monday or next Tuesday? Is one better?
I don't know. You want to switch it up? Do you have a different audience on Monday?
No, usually the same audience. So it's really whatever day is better for you.
Okay. Well, either day works for me.
Okay.
I get a little jammed up at the end of the week on Fridays and Saturdays, but other than that, I'm pretty flexible.
Okay. Yeah, let's switch it up. We'll get you back. Well, yeah, we'll get you back on with Gypsy, and we'll do it next Monday if that's okay.
Okay, and there's a subject that I know a lot of people are interested in: the Knights of the Golden Circle treasures. I have a very, very large amount of information on that, and have searched for those treasures. And I've seen gold that came out of some of those caches. Ooh. I do know they exist for sure. So, that would be something I wouldn't have to worry about repeating myself because we haven't broached that yet.
I'm sorry. I hope it was okay. I made the joke. I didn't know it was the same story until you were in it really good. And I thought, I want to hear it again. That was a great story. So, hey, it's not your age. It's your busy guy.
Yeah. I don't know, Mike. I've got to the point where, I'm telling friends stories. I say, if you've heard this before, just shut me up. Let me know.
I'm the same way. Well, you talk to me. We've been talking a lot. I'm sure you talk to other people, and then you post in the group, and you've been doing the podcast. You forget who you talked with about a story. So, no, it's easy to do, but let's wrap it up. I feel rough, and I've spent most of the evening muting myself because I was having coughing fits. Me and Randy got it going again. So lucky us, lucky us. But we'll have you back next Monday, Dorian. I'm looking forward to it. Folks, him and I talk a couple times a week for a couple hours at a time if he'll let me, because man, does he got some stories, and I would love to do the KGC stuff. So, you've barely touched on that with me, and you've had me sitting on the edge of my seat. So if you're okay with it, I would love to go.
I want to use that to bring out a very important part about historical research, Mike, because, there is a story behind almost every story. And if you want to know the truth about a situation, you've got to dig deep enough to get the story behind the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's just like I'll tell you this real quick when we get off here. The books, there's an old saying that goes way back: victors write the history of a war.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of truth in that. It was the Union officers and generals that wrote all the books after the Civil War. And so for so much of the Civil War, we saw only from their perspective. And then along came a guy named Sam Watkins from Maury County, Tennessee, who served in the Confederate Army through the whole war, wounded 6 times, and so on. And he wrote a book called Company H, AYTCH, and he wrote it from the private soldier standpoint. And we got a view of the real war because the man turned out, without any training, to be a gifted writer. And by the way, he's one of my wife's ancestors. She's related to Sam Watkins.
Oh,
wow. If anybody's listening, if you have the slightest interest in the Civil War, get a book. You can get it in paperback. It's not very, very expensive, $10 maybe. It's called Company H, AYTCH, and it has a subtitle of A Sideshow to the Big Show. It is one of the most awesome books in the Civil War you will ever read in your life.
That's interesting. That's very interesting.
All right, Mike. Well, you take care of yourself and get well.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go lay down. I think I'm gonna go take some medicine and lay down. I'm feeling I'm feeling beat. It's catching up to me quick. So, Dorian, again, thank you so much. Everybody listening,
Sure.
We'll have him back on next Monday. We're going to talk about KGC. Boy, I'm excited. He's already shared some info with me, and I'm telling you, you'll be sitting on the edge of your seat.
Okay.
All
right.
right.
Well, good night, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Good night, Dorian. Thanks for coming on.
Nocta Macro Detectors is the fastest growing manufacturer in the industry, and for good reason. Many detectorists, including Mike Hare, call us the most innovative, but we are so much more than that. We listen to and care about our customers. We also offer a wide range of detectors to fit all of your needs. Come check out all of our products today at www.noctadetectors.com. Detectors for everyone, everywhere, a lifetime.